I'm going to share with you the 11 lessons I've learned as a financial planner. Having had the privilege of working with hundreds of families over this past decade, I've picked up a lot of things that I've learned as I've worked with these people. I'm in a unique situation where I get to hear about the intimate details of people's lives. I get to be there as their health gets better or as it gets worse. I get to see the wins and the successes in careers as people expand their families, as people die. And I just want to share with you what I've learned because I find it's really helpful hearing all these different stories and the way that I want to live my life. And I'm hoping it helps you. I'm Elliot Apple, founder and financial planner of Kindness Financial Planning. And today I'm going to be sharing the 11 lessons I've learned as a financial planner over this past decade. Number one, your health is everything. Everybody thinks they want a bigger house, a more prestigious job, a better car, or some other object. None of that really matters, not to the extent we think it does. Take all of that and imagine for a second your health is no good anymore. What does that mean? Probably nothing. That's been my experience, that these can have life-changing events, that people who picture maybe retirement of a summer in Europe, well, maybe that gets replaced by cancer treatment because they were recently diagnosed. Or someone is planning on caring for a loved one, but instead they end up having a stroke and someone ends up caring for them. These are the types of sickness that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about sitting on the couch. You might have a cold or a flu and you're down. I'm talking about a truly life-changing illness that changes the course of your life for forever. And you think about all the things that you wanted and desired before that point, but they traded anything for the health back. Number two, money is emotional. And I know people don't love hearing that because people like black and white. They like having a firm and clear answer. But oftentimes with money, that's not the case. We can go into the weeds, we can research things, but at the end of the day, it has to be a decision that people are comfortable with. And that is usually an emotional one, the one people are comfortable with, not the one that makes the most sense on paper, but the one that they're happy to make going forward. And that might mean having less money. That might mean making a choice that's more for a lifestyle decision as opposed to optimizing for the most amount of wealth. And that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. And I always go back to this idea of what was money like growing up. And the reason for that is that can influence things pretty clearly. Think about a family that goes out to eat. Are you someone that orders an appetizer? Do you order a drink? Do you get dessert? How expensive is the entree? And as you think about those options, ask the people around you today, what do they do when they go to a restaurant? A lot of that can influence you based on how things were growing up. Some people are, we're never going to order an appetizer, but we might order a drink, or it's water at all costs at that restaurant. And that's why I say money is emotional. Those types of things stick with you throughout life, and they can ebb and flow and change a bit. But for the most part, those significantly influence us. Number three, life happens, sometimes at the worst time. You know, I work with a lot of people who are careful planners, and in that they might be picturing X for retirement. Maybe it's helping their grandkids and volunteering with a local pet shelter. But the moment they retire, they get diagnosed with cancer. Life happened. They have to adjust, or they've been trying their best to help their kid springboard off to college, and their kid ends up dying. And that changes their life significantly. You can set up all the different parameters in place to plan successfully. And that might be a 529 plan. That might be a brokerage account for a child. That might be your own retirement plan. And then bam, something happens. And it's different going forward. And what I've noticed is people who have gone through tragedy, who have lost a loved one, who have had a significant health event, something has happened in their life that is a true tragedy. They're resilient for it and they come back stronger for that. It doesn't mean it was an easy road. It doesn't mean that it was a pleasant road or that they enjoyed it. But I found that those people have a certain resilience about them that when life happened, they figured out a way through it and they've made their life more meaningful in a different way. You can do everything right, and sometimes the cards just don't work out. And that's sometimes where insurance can come into play, like disability, life, homeowners, umbrella, and why that's crucial to review. But otherwise, sometimes life just happens and that's not a great outcome, but that's okay. Number four, the best investment is the one that you can stick with. I always laugh when I hear about how should I invest XYZ online? Here's my situation in 2 paragraphs. No one can really tell you. No one knows you personally and how you'll respond in those different situations. There's some people that say, oh, you need to be 100% stocks, or no, you need to put it all in the bank or all in gold or something else like that. it's not helpful in that regard. It's helpful maybe to get different ideas and different possibilities. But at the end of the day, sometimes the best investment that would result in the most amount of money is not the one that's best for you. And that can be not necessarily the most intuitive, because most people want to have the most money possible. But at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable with the ups and downs in that investment, given what's going on in your life or what's going on in the world. And the best investment is the one that you can stick with. And sometimes that means being more conservative. Sometimes that means being more aggressive. Sometimes that means being both during different parts of life and what's going on. And that's important to keep in mind, because what you read online about rules of thumb or something like that, they may not apply to you. I've met people who can be 100% bonds or 100% cash and probably still have a good outcome in retirement. I've also met people who have 100% stocks that don't necessarily need to be 100% stocks. So the range of possibilities here are very wide. And that's why there is no true one best investment. In hindsight, we could say this amount made you the most amount of money, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that was the best investment for you. Number 5, divorce is one of the most expensive financial decisions you'll ever make. And at the same time, it might well be worth it. If you ever heard the joke, why is divorce so expensive? Because it's worth it. Ha ha ha. You can laugh there if you want or not, depending on your experience. But it's one of those things that I've seen entire shared futures go up in a moment. And that can change things quite a bit, because oftentimes people are working towards a shared retirement with shared expenses, and they have one pile of money to support that. And then all of a sudden that money gets split in two. But then the expenses don't necessarily often get split in two when we consider housing and other expenses that just don't go down that much if you're a single person. And that's important to keep in mind, and why I'm a big advocate for choosing partners carefully, prenups when appropriate, and other precautions to make sure that you're working towards a shared future, but also investing in your relationship, because divorce is extremely expensive. And I've seen people go back to work and change their lifestyle significantly because they don't have the same amount of resources that they were counting on, and they're actually pretty close to retirement when it happens. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying stay with your spouse at all costs. I'm saying invest in the relationship, and if you can grow together, that's better. But otherwise, divorce is a perfectly okay outcome. It's just something to keep in mind, that it can be a very expensive decision, not just in attorney fees, but in what your life will look like afterwards, given the difference in resources. Number 6, people rarely feel financially secure. And I know that sounds strange, but I've met people with a negative net worth all the way up to tens of millions of dollars. And rarely do I meet people and say, hey, I'm comfortable at the number that I'm at today. Usually it's more, oftentimes double. So if you had $1 million, you might say, hey, I'd feel more comfortable at 2. Or if you have 2.5, you might feel more comfortable at 5. There's no specific formula here, but I've often found people always want just a little bit more, and that goalpost always changes. And so if you think you will actually be comfortable at that next number, I would challenge you and say you probably won't be comfortable at that next number, because I've seen people hit those numbers and then it just moves a little bit further along. I think that's just human nature in some regard, but it's a good reminder to sit for a second and just be comfortable with what you have today. Because oftentimes I think people underestimate what they need to be happy and what they need to have a fulfilled life. Oftentimes that number is much lower than they anticipate. So keep that in mind the next time you feel not quite financially secure. Maybe you truly aren't. But in my experience, a lot of times people are actually more secure than they give themselves credit for. Number 7, ugly and done is better than perfect and beautiful if the intention is right. And what I mean by that is, look at some of these images that I have on the screen here. These are actual images that I have drawn, or I should say drawings that I've made for people on the computer, literally in Paint. One of the least elaborate programs that you could possibly use to draw, but people find them really helpful. And I think that that's a good reminder that sometimes it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be started, and it opens the conversation and gets you to a better place by the end of it. I wish I had saved these drawings going back over the last decade, because I could have an entire wall probably filled with printouts of these and just how ugly they are. But what's interesting about that, as we go through it, it starts to make a lot more sense for people. So if something's not perfect in your life right now and you're like, hey, how do I get started? Just remember these drawings. Sometimes it's better to just take a step forward and see what's around you and start doing something, even if it's not perfect. Now, could I have improved these drawings? Could I have taken a drawing class? Could I get better software? Absolutely. But I haven't, because these have done okay. And I think that's important to remember in our own lives, that just getting started, and even if it's not perfect, someone might find it actually really helpful. Number 8, you need community. There is a very stark difference between the people who have community heading into retirement and the people who don't have community. What I've noticed is people who don't have community, they struggle. Work was their identity. That's where they spent most of their time. They maybe didn't develop a lot of friendships outside of that. It's not to say their life can't change and they can't develop community, but those who have a community heading into retirement, they have more of a sense of purpose. They know how they want to spend their time and what's important to them, and they don't feel disconnected the day that they stop going to work. What I love hearing from folks when they head into retirement, and maybe it's a few years down the road usually, is I'm so busy, I have no idea how I worked. I'm loving retirement. And it's one of those things where obviously they were probably working harder when they were actually working for money, but they've found so much fulfillment and joy in what they're doing that it feels like work almost to them, but in a good way. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, that as you have community and doing things that you love, your life's going to be busy and full in a good way. And more importantly, if you're not quite sure how to get there, one of the best recommendations that I hear is to ask for help for something. And I know a lot of people are hesitant to ask for help. And the reason for that is they think that they're a bother. But let's flip the script for a second. And when someone asks you for help, how do you feel? I would say most people feel wanted, and they actually have a desire to go out and help someone. By the time they're done with it, they feel really good that they helped someone else out. Whereas that's not really the case. A lot of people think that it will be a bother, but that doesn't end up being the fact. Most people are eager to help and step in and jump in and do whatever is needed to help that person. So think about that the next time you're hesitant to ask for help. Maybe think about it as you're giving someone the opportunity to help you and improve their life as well. Food for thought. Number 9, purpose brings meaning. And what I mean by that is if someone has a purpose and they feel like they have belonging in this life, usually their lives are pretty well fulfilled. I've known many people on different sides of the spectrum here. Someone who's really wealthy with high income, very high net worth, constantly buying new cars, new houses, trying to impress people. And frankly, he's a pretty miserable person. If you know him personally, and maybe there's someone like that in your life, they're trying to buy that fulfillment and try to reach a good place in life, but they're never going to do that because they don't have friends that they can call on. They don't have family that they can call on. They don't have that community that we just talked about that's going to give them a sense of belonging and purpose. And so as you go out in your own life, try to find that purpose, whatever it is. For someone, it might be volunteering to help kids in the foster system. I knew someone that did that for a very long time and was constantly busy with it, had a calling to it, spent their time gardening and outdoors, loved their husband, spent time with their husband. And it's just one of those things that their life was complete. It was full. They weren't chasing anything. They were very content. And so as you think about that purpose, what are those things in your life that bring you purpose, that help sort of the greater good or other people around you? Number 10, habits can rarely be broken, but they can be moved. And what I mean by that is I'm in a unique position where a lot of people who come to me are naturally savers. They're pretty frugal. That's how they've accumulated money and are willing to pay for advice for it. But what's interesting about that is that frugality doesn't necessarily shut off at retirement. You spend an entire lifetime, multiple decades usually, saving money, and now you're being challenged to actually spend from it. That can be a really hard thing to do, and things I see people struggle with constantly in retirement. I know some people who we set up a monthly withdrawal and we send it to them, and they actually end up saving a little bit of it because that saving feels good to them and they feel like they still need to do that. Maybe they don't necessarily need to, but they want to do that. And so those habits are hard to break, but they can be moved. But people who are naturally frugal are probably going to stay frugal. People who are naturally spenders are probably going to be spenders. What I love is moving that a little bit, though, that maybe there's a retirement travel destination that they've wanted to do, and maybe they're going to splurge on that for their entire family to go. And they actually start using this money as a tool and making it into something meaningful. That's what's cool to see, that as these habits change a little bit, maybe not necessarily break entirely, but they start to use this money for a more fulfilling life, something that will create memories for all those around them. Number 11, time and or luck is an asset. And maybe not an asset in the traditional sense. You can't put it on a balance sheet. You can't necessarily measure it. But people who have plenty of time and or luck, things usually work out really well. I can trace back, why this video is actually being created today, why kindness financial planning exists, to 3 key moments. It was a former Schwab branch manager that took a chance on hiring a sophomore, even though most companies wanted juniors and seniors. It was an operations manager who introduced me to one of the best mentors that I could have ever asked for, who ended up hiring me right after college. And that happened to the second to last day of my internship at Schwab. These are the main 11 lessons I learned being a financial planner for this past decade. I know I will probably learn more. Some of these will be more ingrained, but hopefully you found something that you can take away in your own life today and implement it. Or maybe it just causes you to think about something different, maybe getting into your community more or finding more purpose in your life. Whatever it is, hope you enjoyed watching and you learned something. Enjoy.